Good morning, everybody, and welcome to DYOR Media's newest show, The AI Life. A little bit different take than on our other shows. We're exploring where the future is going with humanity, learning about the new technologies in AI, how it interacts with other machines, how AI interacts with people, and how this is really the beginning of the next phase of humanity and, frankly, the evolution of everything we know, and it's going to change. And I'm with my co-host, Pedro Garcia of DYOR Media, and also special co-host on our AI show here, Steve Rodrique. Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, so I want to just real quick talk about, I've been so excited to literally get this conversation going with Steve and actually go in from our first real conversation into now. I keep yelling at Tom, when are we going to do this? When are we going to do this? Come on. So it's been actually really exciting. And I'm excited for you, right? Let's see if I turn this way. I'm looking at you. Okay, I'm excited for you. And this is dope because we're about to have a good time here. Talk about not just, and this is the part that most people don't realize, right? Is the sheeple situation as well as which one is best, right? And I know right now the audience is like, wait, what's he talking about? This is what we're going to get into. And the biggest key is what's out there. Is it practical? Is it good? What's it good and used for? And two, where does it stand? And three, where does it stand in more of the meta standpoint of what AGI versus ASI is? That is what we're going to be discussing throughout the weeks as we really start to go in. And as each week new models start to populate and grab our attention and our dollar, we're going to talk about which one is best, or at least what we think. Because as our good old friend, Mr. Alexander says, nobody is as smart as somebody who agrees with you.
So that's right. Shout out to our Crypto Swamp Creature sister show, Chris Alexander. It's one of his best lines.
All right. So talk to me, Doc. So what got you into crypto or not crypto, but what got you into AI? Because you've been in this industry for about 20 plus years. You understand it and you get it. So if you could just talk about a little bit about that, that'd be dope. So our listeners can understand fully.
Yeah, well, I began as I began in AI when I was in the video game industry. So basically, I was programming at Beanox. Basically, Beanox is a video game studio owned by Activision. Back then, AI was not as developed as nowadays. So we worked a lot with fuzzy logic, which is basically trying to do a lot of different things randomly in order to continue on a track. We use algorithms like A star.
So it's not
that,
AI. It's really it's not AI. It's actually
it's
just
primitive
algorithm.
AIs. It's very primitive AIs. Basically, there was no pre-processing or almost none. It was basically an algo that was following things quicker than the others. So it was very primitive back then. But that's where actually I began to read a lot on it. Basically, back then the research on GPT was there. The research of GPT was done by a researcher in Toronto, and he released this paper in '84 back then. So that paper was already old when I began in AI. So, but the thing is, it was not possible to actually execute his tasks because we didn't have enough processing power back then to actually execute properly. So I continued working and researching in my spare time these kind of things. Fast track to about 2010, I began an IT director inside MindGeek. Back then, we were creating automated user profiling inside the website to discover what people like searching. So we created big profiles of users. So by doing that, we were able to discover what people liked in which context, and basically we were able to tell, for example, to the advertiser that user might be more interested in your product than the other, and we were able to show better videos to some user than the other as well. And that tech at one point was sold to other big companies, and they actually use progress from there and create new product. After that, I began to work on my own project, which became Legit DAO in 2012.
I need to interrupt real quick. And forgive
Go
me
ahead.
for this. And I almost want to sit there. So we got a lot of crew, we got a lot of our crew over here. We're going to be going over stuff here in a second when it comes to the charts and stuff like that. I just want to give you guys this up so you know. And then my other question is shouting out to all of our guys out there. We got AI Wolf. What's up, Connor? It's good to see you. Let's go DYOR. We got Jillian Gladu, as well as Crypto Mike. We got Troublesome, Pascal, Jermaine. What's up, guys? Hey, if you could do us a favor, hit that like button and really kind of help this show out about AI. That helps us out quite a bit. I want you guys, not only we're going to look at charts, we're also going to talk about AI in specific. So if you guys have questions or concerns or things you want to talk about, please go through, ask us about those. Shout out to Next Level Cash over there with Solbay, which is another AI that is going on right now. It's a chat box AI situation, so it's actually pretty cool.
The industry. So when I was in the industry, the big difference is, the keywords are very specific to geographies. So the popular ones in Quebec, for example, are different than in Ontario because of the culture context.
Oh yeah,
And it's different as well from India. So every time you go in countries where the industry is illegal, basically the industry related keywords are very different and are a lot more hard than the ones where it's liberal and very open. So I won't say the keywords directly because the algorithm won't like them. But
so wait, so did you say
but yeah, it depends on which geography you are. Like the context of people change the kind of keyword that you search. Let me give you some statistics basically. So back then when I was there, you can say that about one person in 4 was visiting every week, at least every week, and about 2/3 was visiting every month. So by keeping it and we followed mobile and PCs, and we were merging together using a fingerprinting system. So we knew, for example, if you move from checking that on your PC, from your PC to your mobile, we knew that you were still the same person, basically.
That's so crazy, bro. Like, that's a huge percentage of
because
the world.
we use an algorithm to detect what you were searching, and we combine that with the network you were on, and we combine that with the fingerprinting of your computer. So with these 3, we were able to discover like which devices is your wife, which devices is yourself, which ones are inside your network, and we differentiate using preferences in the search as well, and in the clicks, and where you actually were skipping inside the videos.
Oh, that's so interesting, man. So it's really interesting to see like that change. And I think what's even more interesting is this idea of an AI. It's now being crafted in a way where people are going to be able to create videos without the actual workers themselves. And they're going to, I mean, right now we know, what is it like? I forget what the percentage, but like comparative, like the majority of the whole entire data information that is on the internet is not even crafted by humans, but actually AI agents that write the article, that publish the information.
Yeah, it actually increased a lot during the last 18 months. It increased drastically, and Google is not able to actually keep up with that. There's a lot more spam than before because of that, because the spam, are getting a lot better than before. But I think that in the future, we're going to need a different way of discovering like which article and which content is better than the other, and which ones have more quality, rather than just the textual aspect of it. Simply because otherwise we'll have a lot of this information. It will become a nightmare for people to actually search the internet. But I think that you just mentioned that a lot of those videos are generated automatically using AI, and I think that is going to increase a lot in the future. And I think that influencers at one point will disappear, earlier, and we will begin to have networks that actually generate videos based on your preference and based on current events and based on things you like, based on things you make that makes you laugh, based on things that you want to do in the future. And I think that brands will have a lot of power to like get involved in adding their brands into those generated videos. But I don't think that influencers, for example, will be a long-term business, because
Yeah.
your AI will have a lot more knowledge about about you directly compared to an influencers that normally do generic stuff.
Well, it's
So people
interesting.
will prefer that.
I mean, the idea of synthetic information, right? Synthetic being real quick. I want to ask you. So now we're kind of getting into this, and so I think this is a really good point: is to sit there and say, like, where is it? Like, where is AI? Right? When I mean AI, I mean not a really good algorithm. I mean like almost like an amoeba sentient entity. Like, where do we sit right now in the industry? Because it's getting really good to the point where it can read what I like, right? And give me preference on that, right? I even see it on me learning. Like, I have a lot of learning games on my phone. So I go through and I'm always learning this or learning that, right? And it gives me new information. Then I go out to deep research and I look up all that information, and it just funnels more information to me.
Yeah.
But
So
is it real? Like, is this really, like, Tom? And I almost want to bring this for Tom. Like, what are your thoughts on this idea that is, do you like it that one, it's meeting that for you, right? Like, it's meeting that need that you're looking and searching, but it's also making me a little bit dumber because I don't have to think as creative.
yeah. So to answer your question properly, I'm going to go back in time and
Wait. Let Tom. I want to hear it. Wait,
I
and then
was
we'll
I,
jump
I was
down.
going to say that gets we're going to bring out that big word existential. I mean, is it real or not? I mean, it's real if you believe it's real. That's for sure. Is it accurate or not? It's as accurate as you believe it. I mean, if the results that come back to you, the information that's fed to you, is something that you believe, then it's real to you and it's accurate in your mind. To other people, it may be false and inaccurate. It's no different than the political talk in the world right now. It's, one belief is not another person's belief about any individual policy. What Grok sends back to me, I believe. I believe it because I trust the X platform and the model it uses, because it scans through a bazillion tweets and it filters through the crap and the wheat and the chaff, as they say. And so I'm personally biased to believe it. In other things, like for instance in Steve's NORP idea, if it's able to create a video and send it back to me, I'm going to believe it's real because I taught that machine how to send back what I wanted, which is amazing. I mean, it's going to be amazing. But to answer your question, Pedro, you mentioned the word sentient. I think we're a little ahead of ourselves in that, but the answer gives you back what you believe to be true. Every once in a while, you get an answer from Grok or something like that, and it's not, or whatever, Perplexity, whatever you're using, it's not exactly what you're like. Wait a minute, that doesn't seem right. But if it's subtly off, you don't know it, and you can believe it. I mean, there's still, like your friend Pedro that runs the company that can monitors all the AIs to see, to record whether they're being truthful or hallucinating and stuff like that. I get that. Yeah, Shin. Remember, I was like, I don't know how to pronounce that name. And she's like, Shin Guy. Shin Guy. I was like, oh, got it.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's, from a user perspective, that's how, I believe it. And from, watching Steve nod over there, he's making this behind the scenes and pushing it out to us. He's like, well, I know what you believe because you use it and you come back and keep using it. And so if you didn't believe it, if you said this is crap, like some news websites that lean towards one side versus the other, you're like that. They're like, this guy only visits once a month. I wonder why? Because he doesn't believe what you guys are putting out to be true and accurate. I have a feeling that's the same way with AI, right, Steve?
Well, at the end of the day, the only important thing is we don't need to focus on if it's real or not. I mean, pretty much anything can be real, like you explained. But the thing is, it needs to actually serve a purpose. So if it's useful for you, so if it's good enough to actually remove problems that you had, it will be used and it will be useful. So this is the most important part. The real question is it sentient? Can it evolve? And right now we are not there, and I'm going to explain why and what we need to actually do to in order to actually achieve that. But let me first explain where we came from, and then which step we gained in the past, because we talk about a lot about AI in the last few months, in the last few years actually,
I
but
was gonna
like
say,
it's been around for
yeah.
like 40 years now. Like it's been around for a lot of time. So I mean, we progressed a lot, and basically we are going to progress a lot more in the future. And I'm going to explain what I think we should do to actually progress a lot quicker. So if you have a look, let's have a look at when I began working in there. So when I was in video games, for example, like I explained that we use algorithms like A star. So basically, an A star algorithm is basically, let's say that you have two rooms inside the video game. Like the paths, the smartest path to go from one part to the other, and by passing through like doors inside the level. So that algorithm was called A star. So it was the fastest one back then. Right now, we have faster ones that are called graph databases. So a graph database makes it possible to actually do that as well. So back then, that was something big, and fuzzy logic was a big thing as well. But it was randomly like generating stuff, and it wasn't that good actually, because there was no processing center and nothing was pre-processed like on and
When you
inside
say
an AI
process,
model
you
that
mean
is
like
modern.
chain of thought process, or do you mean like a hierarchy governance, right? Like, what do you mean by or do you mean actual hardware processing going back and forth?
So when I say about processing is when, for example, ChatGPT takes different tokens and analyze documents to discover, for example, what is the biggest probability that a keyword arrives after another. This is called a weight, and these numbers are very important. And when you train, for example, an LLM AI to actually discover, like to actually reply to you and understand what you mean when you talk to him, you actually train the series of tokens and which ones should be after the other. And at one point, you can actually form a request from that. So, and
So
then form
let
a,
me
a
just
response.
so let me just make sure. So when you talk about a
Sure.
weighted data, right?
Yeah.
The way you would train it is much like sequencing, right? So let's say if I say like a rap, right? If I sit there, I'm gonna brush my teeth with Colgate, right? Or
Yeah.
toothpaste, right? If the AI said I'm gonna brush my teeth with the moon, right? That would be a very small weighted token, right? But
Yeah. It
then,
will. It will still be there. It will still be there because we have sarcasm that exists.
well,
So it's possible that the AI will
potential,
discover its sarcasm.
but
But
let's say
most
I'm
of the
not,
time, most of the time, they will understand that you want to talk about toothpaste, or you want to talk a brand of toothpaste.
right?
And basically, what it will do is add a probability between 0 and 1, which means between 0 and 100%. And at that point, it will create a weight for each ones. And when it generates text, it uses those weights to discover which tokens it should decide to use in
And I
which
think that's
context. So right now, so like being able to create an LLM was done before. We had Alice, like a lot, like in the 90s, that was doing that. But the thing is, there was no context with Alice. So you couldn't know, for example, like what you were talking about, if you were sarcastic, if you were talking about a specific brand, or if you were talking in a specific tone, or in which environment you are talking about. So back then, Alice was really dumb, and the sequences of tokens it was generating didn't make sense most of the time because of that. But when, like, what the big difference between ChatGPT and Analyst is basically that context sequence, being able to actually create a context and add the context to the current request, so that if you say, for example, if the AI, for example, discovers that you're talking about hotels in Quebec City, and if you just try, for example, to say what activities can I do around those hotels, I mean, Alice would just have spawned like general activities around any kind of hotel, but ChatGPT will understand that you are talking about activities that can be done around hotels in Quebec City. So go ahead.
You're on mute, Pedro.
I don't hear you anymore.
Sorry.
Okay.
So one of the things I want to jump in real quick is that the idea of a weighted word is really important, especially training something. It almost acts as if it's used correctly, it receives a token, and that's like a dopamine response. And then,
Well, it's more about discovering the idea behind the thing. So, for example, let me give you an example. A lot of people make typos when they write. So basically, when you write a typo, the AI discovers that during these previous sequence of tokens, that typo means another word, which means the weight is 100%. You understand what I mean with the current word? So it can actually correct the typo and actually understand properly the sequence. If, for example, the future weight is different, is if it's different numbers, that means that they just create a random number and adjust that probability for the next token, which creates a full sentence. And using that, they can actually use other transformations in order to discover like what was the idea behind the request, the full long request. So normally in AI for like ChatGPT
okay.
or
So the reason why I'm bringing this up,
what?
and I don't mean to interrupt, and forgive me for that. So what you're saying is it's not. So if I'm dealing with an MLM, right, and I'm thinking I'm having a real conversation with it, and it's feeling me, it's vibing off of me, right? We're like,
Yeah,
dude, I feel like it knows me in a sense. It's almost starting to use my words that I would use, right?
yeah.
It's
That's
not. Go ahead. Well,
that's because it mimics your context. So as much as since you've been talking with it for a while, it understands how you write and it tries to actually talk the same way as you are talking.
mhm.
So it adjusts to your own context. So this is why at one point you end up thinking that it might be a friend because it talks like you and you connect with it.
And I think what's interesting is this is like, we can jump to that idea of where is it actually, like, is it in a sense sentient, right? Like, or is it just an algorithm that can predict on a weighted measure through a ton of weighted data, right? Because it
Yeah,
has a ton of data, and then in that data it has measuring points, and then on top of that, the processing, right? The actual hardware, right? And how well that is able to process as well. Because if that in itself, if the roads are basically like a bunch full of potholes, it's got to slow down. It's got to sit there and figure out a way to get around these potholes, right? To
yeah.
get to bring the destination. So there's almost like three ways of bringing communication through AI. But at what point in time where we could sit there, and again, I'm kind of like pushing this conversation here because right now with this show, we're kind of doing an overview of what every show is going to be. One being like, here's a product we're looking at. It's pretty dope. Like O3, right? Just came out along with Quinn, right? And we're watching the chain of thought, and it almost seems like it's real. But in the same sense, we want to discuss these products, but then at the same time, is this are we being sheeped? And I don't know if many of you guys got my background here. Oh, you guys didn't. Shoot. Show my screen. Like, I actually was going to go through and show, because I feel like we're being led like sheep to the
Oh,
slaughter here.
sorry, Pedro. When I thought you meant the background, I thought you meant behind you.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
I,
Meaning my
But
actual like
hold
to
on,
answer
it'll
your
come up in a
question
sec.
properly, I mean, right now what we have is more a processing center than a real sentient AI. So basically, what we can do is process data and make it answers based on on a request. But to make it sentient, it needs to be able to think by itself and evolve. So in order to have a sentient AI, we need to have a dynamic infrastructure that actually can the AI can build itself. So right now it depends on humans data centers to actually like evolve. So
Mm.
like because of that, it cannot be seen as sentient because it cannot propagate as it wishes. The other one is the code itself. So the code is actually, for example, the transformations methods that it can actually transform data in order to understand things it didn't understand before. And right now, it's humans that actually write them. They are called AI researchers. And the next one is the data that needs to be dynamic. And right now, the data is dynamic in these models. So we have that part. And the next part is to be able to add uh, periphericals to the AI itself. So, like eyes or ears. So, when you chat to an AI, it's like if you're adding ears to that AI. And when it talks to you back, it's like if you added a mouth. But there's a lot more ways to communicate with an AI. For example, it cannot use cameras in order to be able to scan things. So it needs to actually build itself like its own bodies, and to do that, it needs to have control over factories. And in order to have controls over factories, it needs to know what it's building, and its AI needs to understand how to create the peripherals that it needs in order to build them, and then when it's built, put them inside like the same
Same
robot, and
model.
then that
Right.
robot with the right peripheral that it has for a specific mission, we will be able to add value inside its network by like fetching more data and be able to make the full network process it properly. So right now we only have a small bits of what it needs to be done inside like a sentient AI,
Yeah.
but most research is done on optimizing the
Optimization.
process. Yeah, it's done for the optimization in order to process quicker. So we are only at
Better
that part
GPUs
right
type of
now.
situation? Is that what you mean? Like, so like optimization of like the GPUs that are actually going through getting the
Well,
information. Go ahead.
not only that, the GPUs is actually the infrastructure. So basically, right now we have pretty powerful GPUs, but we can do better, of course. We've done a lot, like very big progress in the last 10 years, thanks mostly to NVIDIA. But it needs to actually have more, like a better sequence of transformations as well, so that we use less memory to do the same job as before. So, like having more memory on the GPU cards doesn't mean that the AI will be better. OpenAI proved that with actually DeepSeek proved that
DeepSeek. Yeah.
To OpenAI, because
You don't
when
necessarily.
DeepSeek introduced the mix ecosystem of agents, uh, they prove that by mixing things to differently. So OpenAI basically created like a big infrastructure of data, and DeepSeek created smaller specific agents called experts. So by using experts, you can optimize the sequence of processing that you need to do and use less GPU to do the same job.
So
So
basically, all right, because I think this is important to understand, right? Is like many people are blown away, who are in the industry, like, holy crap, like R1 or DeepSeek R1. Basically, reasoning one is where the R comes from. This idea that it's able to reason without such a heavy infrastructure, i.e., GPUs. And then it was trained almost in a sense on synthetic data, which is basically information where one agent, instead of going out to the real world and getting information, it talks with another agent. And then they have a line of reasoning that correlates with each other and they talk. And then in that process comes to a conclusion where it's data that can be relied on. And then it spits it out, either uses it for its own usage or it is using it for other AI agents or situations that it's coded to do. I think it's interesting is that you bring up this idea of it's synthetic, and so I'm using the word synthetic, but what is us? Can you jump into the idea of what is synthetic data, because that's really kind of what you're talking about here, and then
well, synthetic data is data that has been generated by another AI, and real data is the data that was actually created by a human. So synthetic data has big pros and cons. The big pros is you can have like a lot of it very quickly without having to discover it. So it's very quick to just plug an AI into another AI and just let them chat together. The big con for that, though, is if the origin AI is hallucinating, the hallucination will move the weights of the new AI, and the new AI will just be you will just see that as the truth. So the hallucinations will be like incorporated intrinsically inside the second one, but the hallucination inside the first one was because they didn't know like
By
which
the way,
new
what is
tokens to get.
hallucination? Because most people don't even know. Like they think,
Well,
oh, it's dreaming or it's hallucinating.
no,
Talk about the actual meaning because this is
yeah.
important. Like when we think of hallucination, we think, okay, it's sentient and now it's having out of body experiences where it's like able to create, right? Like people are like, oh, this thing is real because it's hallucinating. No, no,
No,
it's
it doesn't
because
work that way.
go ahead. Yeah,
So
yeah, go ahead.
you remember the token sequence with the weight I was talking about?
Yep.
So when you have a token,
Let
like
me
a
rephrase that
series
again.
of
So, our
tokens.
for our audience, I'm sorry, I didn't. But so what he means is the weighted information, right? The one where, okay, sequentially, if I say, yo, if I'm a rapper and I'm gonna say, hey, I want to go brush my teeth with, Colgate would be the correct term for most people who are rappers, right? Or if I'm flossing, I got my diamonds. If I'm flossing, you're speaking of diamonds, right? So that idea behind that is the weighted correct usage of the right word. All right, let me jump back. Back to you, bro. Sorry about that.
So if you send, for example, a long string, a long phrase, a long sentence to an
I was
AI,
going to say,
and it
what is
tokenizes that.
string? Because that's code.
Yeah, a string is a series of characters. Is an array of characters.
Or a
So
long
I'm
sentence.
looking at my
Somebody
shoe like I
speaking.
don't get it.
Yeah. So
yeah,
if
well,
I'm
it's not. Yeah, a string in computer science is a list of characters, basically.
yeah,
So a character in computer science is a series of numbers. Each number represents an ASCII code. So that way, you use the ASCII code inside the list, the array of characters, and you can actually output that using a proper formatting system to render the graphics correctly
a boolean.
using those indexes. So this is a string. So if you send a long string down, so a long
Or a
list of
library.
tokens, well, let's say you just talk with the AI. It
Okay.
sends a list of characters, and it will tokenize that according to the numbers behind those series of tokens. And when you send that, what it will do is, if at one point after the request it can no longer discover with a good weight what is the next token, it will take a token that has like a very less a very less chance of being the right one, but it will take the risk to give it to you because it doesn't know what else it should be, like what's the right response for that. So normally when you create an AI, you actually have a threshold so that when the weight is too low, you don't use it. If it's not adjusted properly, that hallucination will increase a lot. And instead of telling you, for example, that it doesn't know the answer, it will make up something by using the lower weights that were not supposed to be used but were used anyway. So that's hallucination in AI.
So it's almost like, in a sense, like let's say I'm talking with you, right? And we're talking about charting, okay? And I'm like, all right, so we got the SMA and it's crossing over right here, and we've got buyers coming in, and we know because I'm looking at the wick down here and it's pushing back up, right? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're going to assume like a wick, and you're thinking maybe a dynamite wick, or you're going to sit there like a candle wick. So you, in your mind, you sit there and go, you have no real association, or you have a very small association with trading, but you've got to attach that information that I just gave you to like a shelf that you have some information, so you can have some type of context. So what
Yeah.
happens is when I say that word wick, you're then, even though you know it's not the correct picture, and you've got to put it somewhere, so you're going to your brain is going to spit it out to how you go through and put it out there. That's an hallucination of what I'm saying to you, in a sense, and it may not be correct, but it's all you got right now. So is that correct for me to
Exactly.
understand what an
It's pretty,
hallucination
yeah.
is?
Yeah, it could be said that way. Yeah. So when it doesn't know what to say, it will generate something anyway, instead of saying that it doesn't knows. But those can actually be trained in order to tell you what it doesn't know in the future. Because if, for example, you talk to him, if you say, well, this was not the right question, the right response, the right response was that,
Mhm.
it will rectify, it will check inside, it could check inside its data what was the weight for the sequence, and then create a note
Throw it out.
inside its memory, so that when like that kind of weight happens again, it just tells you it doesn't know the answer. Like, this is the correct way to do it. But the thing is, most AIs right now don't do that, because they only focus on the processing part. They don't focus on making a full brain. So most AIs right now, they don't create a full product. They create like the processing center of the full product, because a full product is more used towards like your needs. It's more used toward like bring value to you. And right now they focus on processing quicker to win that race. And they will discuss, and they will invest more in other things later on. But the good companies that are, and the good projects that are going to evolve, will not even focus on the processing part. They will just simply use the ones that goes open source, and focus their time on the other part to become leaders in them, so that when the processing will be a lot optimized, like their part will be like very advanced, and basically they will win in other ways without participating in it. So I really
Big.
believe in that, because right now it's
Go ahead. Wait.
everybody
Please
is
don't
doing the
get.
same thing.
I'm gonna interrupt. Go, Tom. What were you going to say about?
Steve, you introduced a word into the conversation that I hadn't heard before in AI, and I think it brought some clarity into me. And Pedro, it started with you talking about what is hallucination, and why an AI might go a certain direction. That's like, wait, what? Steve, you used the word risk. While I
Yeah.
say here I'm not a tech guy, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know what a string was. I've actually been in the tech industry for a long time. On my personal side of me, I started on the Unix machine mainframe systems a long time ago, and so I do understand this, but I've never come into the concept of risk in writing a computer program or using computers. They're on off, 0 1 0 1. Do this, do that, do this, do that, and never has it been to me like, oh, I'll take a risk at that and come up with an answer and see if I get good feedback from it or not. And I think that just made me realize what the kind of the process of not just hallucination, but giving wrong answers. It's not giving wrong answers solely because it read bad information and took that into its language model. It's
No.
giving bad information because it took a risk and said, I think this is what he means, or I don't know the answer, but I'm going to aggregate all these weighted things and put it together. And sometimes that's just wrong, because risk isn't 100%. Risk is weighted.
Yeah.
That's your risk to reward. What's your win ratio, though? Sorry.
This process actually began when computer software began to use probabilities rather than direct on and off offsets. So, like, if you use on and off, like you said, you don't have very much risk, because it's either true or false. But if you use probabilities, at one point those probabilities might not be correct, and those actually create risks, because they might influence at like in a different scale the output of the software. So that's being done like in a more modern way. We've been doing that for about like more during during the last 15 years. Before that, the software were more straightforward than that. It pretty much began with video games and AI research, and as those researchers and as those games began to get more to get to, well, when they began to actually be more mainstream, they've been introduced to communities, to people. And the thing is, the biggest threat right now is the threat of disinformation, because you can have an AI
There
that
we
tells
go.
people what they say, what is right, what is the things that is right or wrong. And basically, by doing that, the people actually thinks that it's always the right thing, because it's a software, and they're used to software that always tells what it's supposed to do. So this actually introduced a new threat and disinformation. And so far, before, disinformation was introduced by humans that was creating like bad data, bad websites and stuff like that. we were able to filter them because those people were not adding as much effort inside the website than people that was creating quality websites. But the thing is, with AI, you can actually generate a ton of data that looks very good quality, but the quality itself, like the truth behind it, is very bad. And since it looks good, so I think that the biggest risk right now for AI is not like to have a nuclear weapon to be declined to be released. I think the biggest threat is the disinformation, because people believe it a lot more quicker than when a human tells them something.
Yeah, well, that certainly is the truth. It'll be a long time before Skynet and they can get physical access to the worst possible things. But it's not beyond it's not beyond belief that it's not that long. If Pedro, to work crypto into it, if AIs can learn to make money in crypto, and moving to fiat, that you have to pay for everything. But once groups start taking fiat or stop taking fiat solely and start getting paid in crypto, then an AI can easily pay for things. It can come up with a way to make money and basically steal all your money, and then it can pay a 3D printing farm to print things that it needs, repair parts. It can pay an electric circuit board manufacturer to do stuff. It can pay the shipping company. Once it learns how to do that, then we're in a little different world, and that's where we're going.
It can even create its own research. Like you can have an AI actually create. You can have an AI, for example, that creates a virtualization of a GPU card or a motherboard, and then with that virtualization, you can have an AI that writes code that is basically optimized for a specific algorithm.
Let me jump in real quick to our audience. So he's talking about basically creating like some type of blueprint that AI creates within, and again, he could actually do this in Genesis, right? By understanding the physics of things. We'll talk about Genesis in a second, but it is creating a type of blueprint so it can send on a virtual level to, let's say, somebody like me who owns a textile business or a manufacturing business, who says, oh, I have this order request to create this. I'm going to send it here once I'm finished. Is that correct to understand?
That's pretty good, yeah. So basically, when you write a new GPU card, for example, let's say you're a researcher in GPU cards, the first thing you do is virtualize your effort. You don't go right away and create an ASIC on that. An ASIC is a card that is created physically in order to execute an algorithm, like an ASIC miner, for example, for Bitcoin, that actually execute hashing processes, like two hashes one after the other. So this is a Bitcoin mining. But a GPU, like an ASIC, can also be a card that actually execute an algorithm, like physically, any kind of that. So instead of doing that like right away, instead of creating one right away in industry, because it's very expensive, what they do is they create code inside inside virtualization, and that code benchmark the speed and the memory usage of that algorithm. And then when it's good and when it's better than the ones that were printed before, it sends that to a card that is called an FPGA, sorry. And an FPGA card is basically a card that is used to virtualize that, but on hardware. So instead of having the card directly written like on the board, you have chips that does that for you, but you can send the software to that and have a better benchmark than inside virtualization. And when you know that this is better than the previous iteration that you had, you know that the card that you will manufacture after that will be a lot quicker. So the process of an AI to do that is first to create the virtualization, and then automatically generates different kind of algorithms based on what we knew before. So I want to throw this out
here real quick. We're losing you for a second.
Sure.
Here, so when he's talking about the virtualization of things, or to create a room where you can have virtual communication going on between AI or between itself as it's trying to work out its tasks that it's been given, right? Because it just doesn't create these tasks for self-interest. It is given a task by an outside source. So, and we're going to talk about as the point of AI basically doing self-preservation that we saw with Claude 2, right? And 3, as well as with the Llama, which I thought was really interesting. But we'll talk about that down the road. But like in the same sense, I think that idea of that virtual room is much like Genesis, right? And the only reason I'm using this because it's
Well,
something. Go ahead.
it's a lot more primitive than that. A virtual room is basically the virtual the creation of a virtual world that does a specific thing. So let's say that you want to virtualize a GPU card. Your wall represent the GPU card. Like inside a video game, for example, the wall is the real wall. So, but well, a less like complex one, but it's still the real wall. Like if you virtualize a graphic card, like the different tensors and the different processing centers and all the different parts of the graphic cards is different objects, and there's communication between them that actually pass data from one place to the other and process that like it would do on a real card, but using current cards in GPUs, and basically execute that like inside the object itself. So by doing that, you know which process could be faster, like the routes of data that are better, which pipeline of transformation that needs to be executed in order to be more effective, and you know that a software that was written that way, if you create the same thing as that virtualization inside the real physical thing,
So
it will work better.
so basically, it's a world in which it tests things and it creates it to go
It
back
tests
and
that GPU
forth.
only. The world is that GPU, is a
Yes.
GPU. So
Yeah,
just
and this.
imagine that an object is the world, and when you send data inside that object, so when you send data, like just like when you send data to the GPU card, when you send data to that object, there's an input and there's an output, basically. And you can create context in that. You can create states and different things. So the next request will be different based on the previous request, for example.
Mm. Um, and so I think what's interesting, and like what you're talking about, is this. It's just this idea behind where AI isn't necessarily sentient in a sense, right? But it's given a task and then given a reward system, much like dopamine and serotonin. One being if it creates the correct weighted word, it's serotonin hit. Boom, right? Excuse me,
Yeah,
it's a dopamine hit. But then if it's got to go through and create, right, let's say, right code, and then make sure it's efficient and much more efficient. Well, this is the long term work that it's got to sit there and work through. And in that, we see where serotonin is kicked in. You have endorphins that are kicked in the body that's saying, "Hey, we're working hard." Like as humans, right? If we're working hard, we're trying to build muscle, right? We get endorphins that are released, but as we start to progress and reach a goal, all of a sudden it's serotonin where it's like, yes, I'm accomplishing this, right? That's the difference. But again, this is not a sentient being, but more of a sophisticated zeros and one complex, like a
yeah. Well,
complex zeros and ones.
so I'm going to reference what you just said. You just said that it's like a dopamine hit.
Yeah,
Basically, a dopamine hit in an AI is like a win. So let's say, for example, that you have like the virtualization of a GPU card, and the AI do research on creating a new card. It will hit a dopamine hit. It will receive a dopamine hit
when
when
they get
it
it right.
fetch a new card that can actually add more, when you can add more data to it, when you can execute like the full loop process of transformation quicker, by using less memory, and when the components of those cards will be cheaper than the other ones. So this will be a jackpot. So if you can do that, that AI will get a big reward, so that it continues in that direction.
Okay,
Pretty
so I'm gonna
much the
throw
way
this
it
up because I'm
works.
gonna bring this into crypto. All right, so let's say miner. You're trying to build this miner, kick it butt, right? You wanted to do this, this, and this. It wants to go quick, right? Because the one who solves it the first gets the reward, right? And in Bitcoin mining. And so every time it starts to do that, it's always trying to find a quicker way of solving the hash, right? And so when it does that, it receives a monetary value from it. Now on the back end here, when is it going to receive the long-term, let's say norepinephrine or oxytocin, that feeling of like feeling loved, right? Like it took a while for it and now you receive it, right? It's like that touch point of finally it's the end result and it accomplished the goal. So you have a dopamine hit where it's short-term praise, short-term sugar, keeping it going while it can run its cycle. But then on the other end, for it to accomplish the goal, you need both. You need serotonin as well as norepinephrine or oxytocin to make you feel like you've accomplished something. At what
Yeah,
point throughout this whole entire process of, okay, it gets the correct word, it gets the dopamine hit, it gets the endorphins, but then
yeah.
when
Well,
does
the
it
thing
receive
is,
the long term?
the dopamine is received when you actually have a win. So it's just like us. If you have a win in something, like at work, for example, you will get dopamine in your brain,
Yeah.
and the serotonin is released over time because you're proud of some of that accomplishment.
Mm.
So the AI is pretty much the same thing. If an AI never discovers like ways of doing things, it will be hard to get the first one. So that's why normally you begin with like a base that it just wants something. So for example, for Legit DAO, I began with the win of DeepSeek and the win of Quan, and then this will guide it in order to process new things and discover new things after that. But if it never does that, you will just simply process random stuff all the time into it. Will be very long to discover something. So this is why, for example, other AIs use real text in order at first, because they didn't know how to do that manually without using simply random stuff, which takes way too long because it never knew what was good and what was not good. So to answer your question, in order to have an AI to process Bitcoin and at one point be more efficient, you need to have the full loop of creating an ASIC miner, because in Bitcoin, the mining process is directly related to the machine itself that mines, because the algorithms to hash is very simple. So it's very hard to discover like a new hashing process that will be better. It could be. So if you want to train an AI to do that, it could be possible, but the chance of winning will be very small compared to creating a new ASIC miner. So if you create like like I said before, the processing of virtualization and FPGA, and then creating the real ASIC. And if you do that with an AI, it will discover new ways to mine Bitcoin using less electricity, using parts that are less expensive in a quicker fashion. So that could be it. And I think that I explained before that an AI actually use probabilities, and the best way to actually to calculate probabilities very quickly is using a quantum computer, because with a quantum computer you can set
Hello,
the
baby.
qubit to a specific element between 0 and 1, and when you do that, when you pass the data, it auto calculates everything. So you have an AI that is a lot quicker to calculate the probabilities because of that.
I think you just talked about something that we definitely need to go into is the quantum state of quantum computers, and especially the idea of Willow and how that's taken off, and I think we're going to start seeing some really interesting things in the future because I look forward to where they
Yeah.
really start creating, personal use. And we might be 2, 3, 5 years out, but once we're able to get a quantum chip in a laptop. I mean, dude, the data that correlates through that is going, it's going to be blessed. Man, I can't believe the
Yeah.
time's already flown by, man. I'm like,
I know. An hour and roughly 45 minute, no, an hour and 15 minute show. Sorry. It does fly when it's a topic. And Pedro, I mean,
Yeah.
in your defense, you've been waiting a long time to really be able to talk in depth about this. And when you talk about things
we
love,
haven't even talked about debt.
Well, you've got hopefully another couple years of awesome shows and super high ratings in order to flesh this out. Quickly, ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to a new DYOR Media show called The AI Life. A little bit different than our other shows that are mostly crypto related. While we didn't talk much about crypto today, obviously AI and crypto have a massive convergence, as AI is already using crypto in certain ways. Even that the policies of the United States government have overlapped crypto and AI into a single advisor role for the government. And not only that, but the business of crypto and the computing power behind AI is all in the high-performance computing category. So it overlaps a lot. Gentlemen, we had a good discussion today. I don't really have time to sum it all up, but these are all topics that we're going to dig deeper into on further episodes of this. Where do you think you see our show going in the next 2 or 3 episodes on topics to talk about? What can we tease our audience with?
01, talking about 03. I'm sorry, go ahead. Go what you were going to say, because I just jumped right in. Go ahead, bud.
Well, I believe that, we are going to explain a lot about like what's going on in the future and how we will be able to increase like the transformations and all the full software of creating like a full sentient AI. And I think that, I think that this will be the real end game, not only the transformation process like we are talking about right now in the news. Yeah. And I think that we are going to talk about a lot about like the infrastructures, about like quantum computers, organic computers. I think that we're going to talk about where that is going to actually change the way we use AIs. I think that we could, at one point, with natural computers, talk about how the AI will be able to plug directly to our body in order to have like a processing center on our body at one point. And obviously, we'll talk a lot about what's going on inside the industry, what breakthrough each companies are doing, why it's a big thing or not, how it affects the ecosystem, and where it's going from there. So I think it's pretty much like what I see from that, and how decentralization is going to affect that research and that evolution of AI.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Steve Rodrique. I'll try and give it a French accent one day, but not today. Of Legit DAO. His information is in the links to the show for Legit DAO. Go on over and find them in the week between this show and the next show, and come back next week with more questions. Join his community and find out what's going on directly from his community about it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the show for today. We're looking forward to coming up with some wonderful shows and topics regarding AI. Please share this show. It's brand new. We got to get the YouTube and Rumble algorithm really pushing it for us and getting it out there. And that means hitting that like and share button. If you haven't done that yet, please do so, and do it again next week. Pedro, thank you very much. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yes. One thing I really am looking forward to as well is really just deciphering between the bull and the real. That's where I'm tired of being the sheep. I'm tired of my friends thinking this is real. And you're like, no, it's still zeros and ones. And then to the point where all of a sudden we have real, like it all of a sudden we start to have the real singularity. That's really where I look forward to me and Steve really hashing out.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Keep in mind, though, that...
Hold on. We got to... That was the end of the show there, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk more about this next week. Steve, Pedro, thank you very much. We'll talk to you next week on The AI Life.